Did you guys know that 5 people, including 2 doctors, were arrested and charged in connection to Matthew Perry's death? And his assistant was just sentenced for his role. Let's talk about it. Matthew was born in 1969 to his parents Suzanne and John. His parents divorced when he was only 9 months old, and it was his mom, who was 21 years old at the time, who primarily raised him. His dad left to go to California and pursue his acting career. He walked out on them, quote, "I'm told my father took me out of my car seat, handed me into my grandfather's arms, and with that he quietly abandoned me and my mother." Matthew's mom was a busy woman. She worked very long hours and she traveled for work, leaving Matthew with a feeling of loneliness that would stick with him throughout his entire life. But as a kid, as soon as he was able to understand that his family situation was not ideal, that he did feel lonely and like he lacked love and attention that he craved, Matthew developed a side of him, the funny side of him, that he would use as his survivor tool to keep his head above water, because maybe he didn't get the attention that he wanted and needed from his mom, but if he could make her laugh, then that meant something to him. And maybe he wasn't like the other kids because inside he felt more alone than most, but if he could make them laugh, then that was enough for him. And yeah, his day-to-day thoughts were more sad and isolating than most, but if he could make someone laugh, then he wouldn't have to think about those thoughts and he would be able to find happiness knowing that he at least made somebody else happy, even if it was just for a few seconds. Throughout the time that he was growing up, Matthew also lived with a fear that one day maybe his mom would walk out on him too, just like his father did, and those feelings became a fear of abandonment that he fought against his entire life. Even later on in his life, we see this in his romantic relationships. If he started dating someone, for example, when he dated Julia Roberts, he would self-sabotage because he would start thinking that he needed to leave them before they could get the chance to leave him first, because the thought of feeling abandoned was so unbearable to him that it was a mindset of, well, at least it was my choice and I can't be left if I'm the one choosing to walk away. And that's what happened with Julia Roberts. He was so happy in that relationship, but he felt like he never deserved her, so he left her thinking that he was protecting himself from a potential future heartbreak. Quote, "Dating Julia Roberts had been too much for me. I had been constantly certain that she was going to break up with me. Why would she not? I was not enough. I could never be enough. I was broken, bent, unlovable. So instead of facing the inevitable agony of losing her, I broke up with the beautiful and brilliant Julia Roberts." Matthew Perry was 14 years old when he had his very first drink. He was with 2 friends. His mother wasn't home and he just laid outside on the grass and looked up at the stars. And for the first time in forever, he felt inner peace. The loud negative thoughts inside of his head were not there. His feelings of loneliness went away. In fact, all the feelings went away and they were all replaced with what felt like pure bliss. He was numb, but he was so peaceful and he liked that a lot. He was living in Canada at this time, but when he turned 15 years old, he realized that he needed a change and he really missed his father. His dad by this point was remarried and he had children with his new wife. But when Matthew and his mom pitched the idea of Matthew moving to California to be with his dad and his new half-siblings, it seemed like a good idea. It felt like a change of scenery would be good for him. So that's what he did. He moved to California and there he spent more time with his father than he had his entire life. His dad was an actor and he was also a guy who liked to have a drink. Matthew looked up to him. He started thinking about pursuing acting as his career choice to follow in his footsteps, and he also started to notice a pattern that every single day his dad would come home and after a long day he would have a drink and say, quote, "This is the best thing that's happened to me all day," end quote. So Matthew started doing the same, but there was a difference there because when his dad stopped, Matthew couldn't. So for as long as he could remember, Matthew wanted to be a famous actor, not only because his dad was and he looked up to him, saw inspiration in him, but also because of all the attention that would come with it. Remember, he was someone that craved love and attention from his parents that he never really got, and he was also someone that wasn't confident, was lonely, and fought a lot of mental inner battles. But if he could act, he could make people laugh on camera, which was the one thing that he had always loved to do, and maybe he could get the world to love him, even if he didn't love himself. Quote, "There was steam coming out of my ears. I wanted to be famous so badly. You want the attention, you want the bucks, and you want the best seat in the restaurant," end quote. Matthew's dreams came true in 1994 when he landed the role of Chandler Bing on the show Friends. He had acted before on various projects, but this was the one role that he really wanted. He was 24 years old at the time, the youngest member of the cast. He was in desperate need of money, but he was also incredibly passionate. When he first heard about the show and about Chandler's character, all he could think about was that he was everything that Chandler was. All of Chandler's personality traits that his character needed to have on the show, Matthew Perry had in real life. So it was a role that he could so easily play because it came so natural to him. Chandler was someone that had bad luck with girls, someone who made people laugh. He was the funniest. He got uncomfortable with any type of silence. Quote, "It wasn't that I thought I could play Chandler, I was Chandler," unquote. When he auditioned for it, he didn't even bring his script with him because he had learned all of the lines by heart. But he got the role, he got the call, and it kind of saved his life. Quote, "I don't know what would have happened to me had the call gone the other way. It is not out of the realms of possibility that I may have ended up on the streets of downtown," end quote. And I do not have to explain to you guys how big of a success the show Friends was. Everyone and their mom knows the show Friends. To say that it was successful would be an understatement. The 6 cast members on the show began making a little bit over $22,000 per episode, then $75,000 per episode, and eventually they were making $1 million per episode. On top of that, the dynamic of the actors and the actresses on the show was literally everything that an actor could dream of. They were best friends in real life. They bonded, getting closer and closer throughout the years until they eventually became more like family than friends. They had so much fun on set. They all truly loved and cared for each other. They were always laughing, always smiling, and it truly created for all of them such a magical, real, raw experience. Matthew Perry was on Friends from the time that he was 24 years old to 34 years old, and he was absolutely adored by the entire world. But throughout it all, there was the same constant in him that had been there his entire life. The battles that he fought being dependent on drinks and substances. Matthew Perry was in a bad jet ski accident in 1997 while filming for a different show. He remembered losing control of the jet ski, and when he came back to, there were 40 people around him. He was hurt by this, obviously. He hurt his neck pretty bad, and for that pain, he was described Vicodin. I think that's how you pronounce it. He took it, and it did help with the pain, but it also very quickly became something that he not only wanted, but needed. Quote, "It wasn't my intention to have a problem with it, but from the start, I liked how it made me feel, and I wanted to get more." Throughout the next year of his life, Matthew Perry was taking these daily, and he was taking so many of them, and things got to the point in which he began to spiral. He was out of control and very unhealthy, in his own words, not only from the substances, but also from the drinks. He began losing weight because all of his appetite was gone. He got down to weighing 128 pounds, and he started doing things that made him not even recognize himself. For example, on Sundays, he would go to open houses for the sole purpose of going into strangers' bathrooms to see what he could find and take from their medicine cabinets. He lost himself in it completely. He first went to rehab in 1997, and from then on, he was in and out. Quote, "I have spent upwards of $7 million trying to get sober. I have been to 6,000 AA meetings. I've gone to rehab 15 times. I've been in a mental institution, gone to therapy twice a week for 30 years, been to death's door," end quote. So things were getting pretty bad, and even though he tried to be his best self on set, the cast on the show were some of his closest friends in real life, and they noticed. It's not surprising that they noticed because it would have been hard not to. Matthew Perry said that he had absolutely no memory of 3 full years in which he was filming Friends. Quote, "I don't remember 3 years of it. I was a little out of it at that time, somewhere between season 3 and season 6, end quote. But one thing that he did remember and was never able to forget was a moment between him and Jennifer Aniston when she went up to him and told him that they could smell it on his breath and that he needed help. Quote, "He is one of the most sensitive people I've ever met, more than most girls I know. His feelings get hurt. He cares what people think. It was terrifying watching someone that you care about in so much pain," end quote. Matt LeBlanc, who played Joey on the show, also tried to step in and help. Quote, "I tried to talk to him. There wasn't a response. It's such a personal struggle. They need to bottom it out on their own," end quote. Lisa also tried showing up for him, but what he was going through, those battles, it really sadly is a case of that person is not going to get better unless they want to get better. And that's a decision that they have to make all on their own. Well, hard doesn't even begin to describe it. When Matthew was sick, it was not fun. We were just hopelessly standing on the sidelines. We were hurting a lot. Matthew is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. He's charming and hilarious. Most of our hard laughs came from Matthew," end quote. Things for Matthew got harder before they got better. In one instance, instance, this is later on in his life, but because of everything that he was taking and doing, he ended up having to be put in a coma for 2 weeks, and he was given a 2% chance at survival. But it was in 2001 when something changed for the better for him, because he decided that he needed to figure out a way to live his life without the drinks, without the substances, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to, or else he knew for a fact that he wasn't going to be alive for much longer. Quote, I can't describe it because bigger things were taking place that I can't put into words. I didn't get sober because I felt like it. I got sober because I was worried I was going to die the next day, end quote. So one day, while he was laying alone in a hotel room, he called his parents and he admitted that he needed help. He flew back to California and his parents took him to another rehab center. Quote, it was scary. I didn't want to die, but I'm grateful for how bad it got. It only made me more adamant about trying to get better, end quote. So after Friends ended in 2004, Matthew Perry spoke publicly about his struggles that he had while filming for the show and about how he was doing better and about his intentions to continue doing better, saying that you can't have a problem for 30 years and expect it to be fixed in 28 days. Quote, you don't recover from what I went through overnight. It's a day-to-day process. So he worked on himself, continued getting the help that he needed, and decided that the one thing that he knew for a fact that he could be good at was helping people. Even if he still faced times in which he didn't know how to help himself, he prided himself in always being able to help others. In 2013, he ended up opening a 5,500 square foot property in Malibu as a sober living facility for men, and he did just that. He helped a lot of people. Quote, when I die, I don't want friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want helping others to be the first thing that's mentioned, and I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that, end quote. But despite his massive efforts to fight against it all, Matthew Perry struggled badly in the last months of his life. In the fall of 2023, he fell back into old habits, and it was October 28th of 2023 that would become one of the hardest days for everyone who knew and loved him. Matthew Perry was found deceased at his home in LA at the age of 54 as a result of accidental ketamine. Matthew Perry had been undergoing legitimate ketamine infusion therapy to manage his depression and anxiety, but toxicology reports showed that the level of it in his system were far beyond what would be medically appropriate. Because of that, in May of 2024, authorities opened up a formal investigation into not only how he had obtained it, but why there were such large amounts of it in his system. So, the legitimate ketamine infusion therapy was exactly that. It was legitimate, but because it was actually helping his depression and anxiety, he wanted more of it so that he could feel the benefits from it 24/7, not just when he was doing the therapy. And when his treating physicians refused to increase his dose, Matthew Perry then looked to get it elsewhere, first through 2 Southern California doctors. 42-year-old Dr. Salvador Plasencia from Santa Monica was thrilled when Matthew came to him for this because he knew that he was famous, he knew that he was rich, and he wanted money. But he was clueless, honestly, about what he was doing, so he reached out to another physician, 54-year-old Dr. Mark Chavez from San Diego, and he tells him, look, if we can provide Matthew Perry with what he's requesting, we are going to be able to make a lot of money. So that's exactly what they do. They start texting each other, so excited about the idea of how much money they can make, saying, quote, I wonder how much this moron will pay. Let's find out, end quote. Then they begin making false representations to a wholesale distributor that will sell them large amount of substances that they then plan on selling to Matthew. They write fraudulent prescriptions in the name of a former patient without that patient's knowledge or consent. Then they get the stuff, distribute it to Matthew outside of the usual course of professional practice and without legitimate medical purpose, without the proper safety equipment, and without properly monitoring Matthew Perry. After doing these procedures, like they once gave it to him through a procedure that they did inside of a parked car in a beach parking lot, completely going against any and all medical training that they had. And then, because those two didn't have the time to be with Matthew Perry at all times every single day, they loop in Matthew's live-in assistant, 59-year-old Kenneth, so that he could take care of providing everything to Matthew Perry when they didn't have the time. And that's what happened on October 28th of 2023. Kenneth did the procedure, has zero medical knowledge, by the way, and then he leaves. And Matthew Perry then passes away. When this happens, this is headline news, of course, and all three of them immediately start communicating about how they need to hide their involvement in this, falsifying documents, making up false treatment plans just in case they did need to explain something. One literally texting the other, quote, delete all of our messages, end quote. But authorities figured it out and they arrested a total of 5 people. Dr. Mark Chavez, Dr. Salvador Plasencia, Kenneth, 54-year-old Eric Fleming, and a 41-year-old woman, I think you pronounce her name Josephine. Those last two played a huge part in supplying the substance. Authorities conducted search warrants and found more than enough evidence that all of these people had been involved in fraudulently obtaining and distributing mass amount of substances that they should have never been able to, and every single one of them was found to be involved in illegal activity. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram described the pattern at a press conference, saying that as Matthew Perry's dependence deepened, he began prioritizing speed and cost over safety, eventually falling victim to people who were eager about taking advantage of him and his money. An attorney also stated, quote, these defendants cared more about profiting off of Mr. Perry than caring for his well-being, selling dangerous substances, or gambling with other people's lives over greed. This case, along with our many other prosecutions to cause death, send a clear message that we will hold accountable for the deaths that they caused, end quote. Kenneth, the personal assistant, was sentenced just yesterday, May 27th of 2026, to 41 months, 3 years, and 5 months in federal prison. Eric Fleming, one of the middlemen, was also just recently sentenced to 2 years in a federal prison. The woman, I think you pronounce her name Josephine, was sentenced last month to 15 years in federal prison, more than all of the other defendants combined. At sentencing, she said, quote, these were not mistakes, they were horrible decisions. My choices shattered people's lives and the lives of their family and friends, end quote. Dr. Plasencia was sentenced in December of 2025 to 2 years and 6 months in prison, and Dr. Chavez was sentenced in December of 2025 to 8 months of home confinement and 300 hours of community service. Yeah, everything about it is sad from beginning to end, really. But that is all from me today. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm curious what you have to say. I'm sure a lot of you, if not most of you, also completely adored Matthew Perry like the rest of the world. But yeah, thanks for spending time with me today and for listening to his story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.